TYT Investigates looked into South Bend, Indiana, where Pete Buttigieg, of course, is the mayor, and found that there were several people in the area who had been fired as a result of recordings of police, South Bend police, saying racist things. Now, the interesting thing is all the people who have either been fired or demoted were not racist, were not part of making these comments. These were all individuals who were either targeted in the racist rants in the tapes or discovered the racist rants in the first place. Now, Jonathan Larson looked into this story. I want to be clear in that the racist comments made in these tapes by these South Bend cops happened prior to Pete Buttigieg becoming mayor. However, Pete Buttigieg is part of some of this story that is important for you to know. But with that said, let's go to Jonathan Larson. He was on the damage report with John Iadarola explaining the core of this story. Take a look.
So there's a lot of moving pieces to this one. The existence of the tapes has been known for a while, since early on in Buttigieg's mayoral administration. What remains unclear is what's on the tapes. And in terms of what we did to advance that story is we got a hold of the settlement that Pete Buttigieg signed with the woman who got fired from the police department for her role in the tapes, laying out what the city's rationale was for wanting to keep quiet the contents on the tape, which specifically talks about the fact that if she shares what she knows from listening to the tapes, it could have a negative impact, quote, negative impact on some prosecution. So that was one thing we found out. And then another was that it turns out there was another incident involving police with racial overtones the following year. And according to the head of public safety, the board of public safety for the city of South Bend at the time, city attorney was fired by Mayor Buttigieg for failing to block a request to have the Indiana State Police investigate that incident. So those were the kind of big overarching themes, but there was a lot more I heard while I was in South Bend as well, as I'm sure you saw in the article.
Okay, so I want to be clear about a couple of things. First of all, TYT Investigates is the objective reporting arm of TYT, and so they did this report, but going to South Bend, talking to sources. He talks about it, sources. Some of them are named, some of them are confidential, and in terms of Buttigieg's role, it appears to be the cover-up, and it is really disconcerting. So Anna's going to give you some of the details, but just to build off of what Jonathan said, and he's not only our managing editor, but he happened to report on this particular story. So then this is the official excuse in the documents that we found. Hey, we're worried that if you find out how racist our cops are, that it could impede prosecutions. Well, I would want it to impede prosecutions if the prosecutions were tainted by their racial prejudice. So I think the ACLU should look into this, civil rights activists should look into this. I mean, that is a very poor official excuse to give. And now they could say, well, I mean, we didn't mean the ones that are exculpatory, although it certainly sounds that way. We meant, hey, we don't want to interfere with an ongoing police investigation. But that was years ago. So there's no more ongoing police investigations. So what's your excuse for covering up the tapes now?
Yeah, this story is super strange because it all started with the communications director for the police department coming across the tapes where the police officers were allegedly saying racist things about the police chief at the time, who was South Bend's first African-American police chief. His name was Daryl Boykins. Now, Daryl Boykins was made aware of this, and at some point, the communications director was fired. And then these tapes weren't made public, okay, but they were part of an investigation. At that point, Mayor Pete gets elected, he comes into office, and he starts to encourage Daryl Boykins to step down, to resign. Again, this is the black police chief. And the reason for asking him to resign was that he was allegedly threatening his subordinates, although that wasn't ever proven. And Boykins first said that he would step down, and then he said, no, I'm not gonna step down, I'm not gonna resign. And then Buttigieg demoted him, okay? So that was an interesting thing that happened in the very beginning.
Yeah, the tapes have a long history. They started recording the cops for a legitimate reason. And then they forgot they were recording them and they kept on recording them.
Right.
And then when the tapes were discovered, the claim by the people who were against the police chief was that he was using the tapes to maintain his power. Now, it is awfully convenient that the tapes have a lot of racist things in them, according to everyone who's heard them, and some of them directed at the police chief, and none of the racists are fired, but the black police chief is demoted, and the woman who revealed the racism is fired. So you can give me a lot of excuses as to why that happened, but it looks like every other case I've ever seen where you just fire the troublemakers who are pointing out the racism in the institutions. And the guy who made those decisions was Mayor Buttigieg.
Yes, and now, okay, if this is where it gets really bad, in my opinion, okay? Now, there was a vote. There was the Board of Public Safety in South Bend, and they had a public vote, right? And they wanted to have more of an investigation into the police department. So the board has this vote, and they vote unanimously to get a different law enforcement agency involved to do an investigation into South Bend police. Buttigieg did not like that. And since he did not like that, he fired the city attorney for refusing or failing in blocking that investigation. That is unacceptable. So that was the South Bend Board of Public Safety, again, voted unanimously to petition the Indiana State Police for an investigation. And after that, again, in 2013, Buttigieg fired this other employee, a city attorney, allegedly for failing to prevent an outside agency from being brought in to investigate the second incident with racial overtones. And by the way, the second incident involved a black police officer who was apparently dealing with a racist situation on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And the police department failed to get that black cop any backup.
In fact, Teachman, who was the new police chief, who was appointed by Buttigieg, is the person that they were concerned did not, at the time, respond to back up his fellow officer. Now, it's one thing to make judgment calls on what happened in that particular incident, but we're not doing that here. What we're pointing out is there was a vote to have that investigated by the Indiana State Police to see if, hey, anything went wrong or nothing went wrong. It was just a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, which is totally possible, right? But for Buttigieg to go, what, you're gonna investigate the guy I appointed as chief after I demoted the black police chief? No way, no way. You didn't block that investigation, you're fired. No, that's bad, that's bad. So we've got two significant issues here that TYT has uncovered. And now to go back to the other one, Karen DePape, who was fired for reporting the racist material in the tapes.
She was the communications director for the South Bend Police Department.
Their excuse is nearly non-existent. For the police chief, for the original police chief, Boykins, they said, well, maybe you were using the tape for your own benefit. It just so happens that they were yelling at you partly because you're black, okay? But I'm gonna ignore that and I'm gonna demote you instead. That's already pretty damn bad, right? But for the person who discovered the tapes, what did she do wrong? Well, hey, we don't like that kind of trouble around here.
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
That does not look good.
And I just want to quickly note that the press secretary for Buttigieg's campaign did get in touch with TYT Investigates, and the statement reads as follows: These unsubstantiated allegations and rumors are too far-fetched to merit a response.
Preposterous. These are documents that we found that are in the official record. What's unsubstantiated about that?
Well, he continued to respond, so let me give you more. According to TYT Investigates, he reiterated Buttigieg's statement that he had not listened to the tapes and that he demoted Chief Buttigieg'S after losing confidence in him. That's not much of an explanation.
Yeah.
The press secretary did not explicitly address the claim that Buttigieg fired a city attorney for failing to head off the Board of Public Safety's request that state police investigate a controversial 2013 incident involving South Bend police, but said the mayor stood by the board's decision.
So let me say the last couple of things here. He demoted Chief Buttigieg'S for a very vague reason, but says he didn't listen to the tapes. Wait a minute, if I'm the mayor of a town and somebody tells me, oh, a lot of your police are on tape being wildly racist, I'm gonna review the tapes. I'm not gonna be like, nah, not interested. You know what, let them run racist all over South Bend. They're just cops. What? Why didn't you review the tapes? And that's his excuse. That's the comment they gave us. And not us as in the Young Turks doing this show. We have analysis, perspective, commentary, etc. to our reporters, okay? They're investigating the story. If you got a good explanation, they definitely want to hear it. And so that's a terrible explanation. And Karen DePape was, that case was settled. She was paid over $200,000. That's not a, hey, go away settlement of $15,000. And that means that the person who brought the case is usually wrong, right? That's a significant settlement where they're like, in South Bend, Indiana, we're gonna give you over $200,000 for firing you because it appears because they didn't really have a good excuse. We just wanted to cover up what's in those tapes and what's in that police department. One last thing, and please read the story for yourself. It's got a lot of important details. We'll put the link down below in the description box if you're watching this later on YouTube, Facebook, or other platforms. But one of Buttigieg's top donors was also in favor of the new police chief. And he's the one that was involved in that scandal of not backing up the black police officer. So is that the reason why? I don't know, I literally don't know. But it does raise an eyebrow as to why Buttigieg is doing these things that for most progressives would seem fairly unconscionable. And so read the story, it's important. And this is finding out more about the candidates, and that's what the primaries are for.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.